What's up, guys? All right, today we're going to go over Miyamoto Musashi's first duel. But first we're going to go over a little bit of his history, of his family history, because there's, the one thing about the really cool thing about this book and confusing thing is that there's multiple different perspectives. So there's different people that wrote about Musashi and they have conflicting stories with Musashi's, and then there's, basically there's different perspectives and you kind of have to come up with your own. What I'm going to read you today is mostly going to be kind of what the author justifies or what the author kind of pushes. So basically, when he was young, he trained a lot with his father, Musashi's father. He succeeded so his father was known to train with the Jite, Jitte. It's basically made to defend a sword. So it's about like a small stick like this, has a little hook on the end, and you can trap the sword and hook it down. So his dad was like well trained in that, and which he trained Musashi in as well later. So Musashi, he fought a famous sword master named Yoshioka, and he won 2 bouts out of 3 and received from the shogun the title of best in Japan. So his father was one of the best swordsmen of his time. So you can wonder why. No wonder Musashi trained, but he only trained with his dad at a young age. So you can imagine he gets the best training at a young age. And then later he actually stays with his uncle, and who is a monk, and he's like a Zen monk, and he practices calligraphy. All about learning to be super present. That's what all that stuff is. Like all your energy at every moment, just very, very precise, which you can see how that translates to swordsmanship. So basically it talks about sometimes there's some contradictory documents, but for the most part, Musashi was born around 1580, and his birth name was Binosuke. His father, Musashi, was already more than 50 years old. So his father was 50 years old when Musashi was born. His mother, daughter of Lord Shinman, died in 1584. Musashi married a young woman, Yoshiko. So that was not Musashi's actual mother. Musashi's mother died a few years after he was born. Actually, that's in one document. Another document says they divorced. Musashi married a young woman, Yoshiko. Yoshiko took good care of Binosuke Musashi, who considered her his real mother. Musashi was already almost 60. Not long after their marriage, Musashi divorced her. Yoshiko returned to the village of Harafuku with Binosuke. Musashi is Binosuke. And soon after married a member of her clan whose wife had just died, leaving him with 2 sons. So Musashi's dad divorces, and then he ends up staying with the woman he divorced, Yoshiko. Little Binosuke and his mother, because he thought that was his real mother at the time. And he lived with his stepfather and 2 stepbrothers. He soon became aware of what the situation was, and also of the fact that Musashi, who lived in the village of Miyamoto 12 kilometers away, was his real father. He learned that his family belonged to a lineage of martial arts. So he basically, all of a sudden, he's growing up with this stepmom and these stepbrothers, and then he's like, finds out that actually he comes from a long line of swordsmen. Actually, Musashi's grandfather was a famous swordsman as well. It's pretty cool. So all of a sudden he wakes up one day, he's like, man, I come from a long line of swordsmen, great martial artists. It's like, they're only 12 kilometers away, I'm gonna go. He learned that his family belonged to a lineage of martial arts masters. His father, like his great-grandfather, was a great adept of the sword, and also the Jite, Jitte, I don't know how to say it. In his youth, had received the title the greatest adept in Japan from the last shogun of the Ashikaga family. Binosuke no doubt asked himself the question, why am I not living with my father, who has an excellent reputation and who occupies an important position in the fief? Why do I have to live with a man and his children who are neither my father nor my brothers? He became a difficult and violent child, engaging in games of war with the children of the village. Soon, his mother, worried about his education, placed him with one of his distant relatives. And this is cool because this is similar to the novel. The novel, he was with Takuan. Takuan was a monk. It's kind of like the Yoda character. And so he never really, there was a true Takuan who was a monk, a Zen monk that lived around this time, but that's not who he actually studied under. His uncle was a monk as well. So because he became a difficult and violent child, they placed him with one of his distant relatives, a monk named Dorian, who lived in a temple in the neighboring village, 3 kilometers away. From this monk, who was already 50 years old, Benosuke received his basic education. In the novel, Musashi was strongly influenced by a Zen monk named Takuan, but this is purely fictional. The monk Takuan did exist, and he wrote an important text on Zen and the art of the sword, but it is not certain that Musashi ever met him in the course of his life. So, basically, he lived most of his young life at Dorian's temple. From time to time, he went to visit the house of his stepfather, Tasumi, where he was reunited with his mother, Yoshiko. He also began to go occasionally to the village of Miyamoto to visit his father, Munasai, an austere man who was quick to see the talent of his son for the martial arts. So he would go visit him. I assume he would go occasionally train. So he's living with a monk, learning calligraphy and practicing calligraphy all the time, and then he would occasionally go and visit his father in a neighboring town. So basically, what the author's saying is like he basically had a pretty complex childhood. As he's growing up, he becomes a little more and more interested in the martial arts, and his father instructed him in the art of the sword and the jite. In the meantime, in 1589, on the order of Shinmin Sokan, Munasai had to kill one of his students. Basically, he was ordered to kill one of his students. After this event, under pressure from the Hoden family and other vassals, Munasai, Musashi's father, had to leave the village of Miyamoto and take up residence 4 kilometers away in the village of Kawakami. Benosuke Musashi, who was a powerful and precocious lad, made remarkable progress and reached the point of expressing criticism of his father's swordsmanship. So at a young age, I'm assuming this has got to be around 10, 11, 12 years old, and he's already criticizing his father's swordsmanship. Because of the friction between him and his father, Benosuke stopped visiting his father's house. Okay, so in one of these books, this is just comes from one of the sources. It says, the master was born in the 12th year of Tensho era, 1584, in the fief of Banshu. Benosuke was his childhood name. His father, Minosuke, was an adept of the sword. When he was a child, the master often criticized his father's art. One day, when he was 9 years old, leaning against a post, he watched his father cutting some toothpicks. As usual, he criticized his father's art. His father lost his temper and threw a knife at him. The master, Musashi, dodged it with a slight movement of his head, and the knife stuck in the post next to him. Minosuke, Musashi's father, got still angrier and drove him out of the house. At the time, Minosuke's younger brother was a monk in the temple not far away. The master went there, and the monk raised him. The master lived in the temple until the age of 13 and learned calligraphy from a master of the art. So basically he lives with his father for a while. I'm pretty sure he was kind of going back and forth, tried to live with his father for a while, but criticized his father's art. He couldn't deal with it anymore. Throws a sword at him. Even if doubts may be raised concerning the authenticity of this account, it leads us to think that when he was very young, Musashi had already attained a certain level of accomplishment in the martial arts, and that he was conscious of it, even though this might have been misplaced juvenile pride. 4 years later, at the age of 12, Benosuke fought his first duel at 12 years old. Let's see where I should start with this. I'm just going to read you one, because there's a couple different interpretations of the story, and I think this is the best one. Ooh, this is interesting. Okay, cool. We'll get to the duel in a second. This is cool. Musashi's first duel was with a man named Arima Kihei. Anyway, he was an adept of the sword. Basically, Bokuden was a master trained with the Kashima school. It was in reference to him. Musashi wrote in the Scroll of Earth. Scroll of Earth is a section of his book, the Book of Five Rings. In the Scroll of Earth, he wrote, "Some time ago, the Shinto priest of the Katori shrine near Kashima founded a school saying that their art had been transmitted to them by the gods, and they propagated this art in all the provinces." This is cool. So the way they believe it was transmitted to them by the gods was basically they would practice Gyo, G-Y-O. Gyo is basically leading an ascetic life for 1,000 days. According to legend, the priests had transmitted the martial arts from ancient times. A document of the time tells us that a period of seclusion of 1,000 days in the temple, leading an ascetic life, was required in order to prepare one's mind to perfect one's swordsmanship. Legend reports that at the end of these 1,000 days of Gyo, Bokuden had a divine revelation that then named the essence of his art the single sword. Musashi mentions this legend in this book. Gyo is the ascetic practice through which a spiritual level could be called a realization of the way. Du or Michi is sought. So they're seeking this huge realization of the way. The ideogram Gyo means to go, to walk. These ideas derive from Buddhism, but they are incorporated at a very early stage into the body of traditional Japanese practices and beliefs, and also into traditional Japanese art. So when the master was 13, Arima, an adept of the Shinto Ryu, he's an adept of these people who believe their technique was given to them by the gods, was traveling in order to perfect his art, Mushishoju. So this guy's going about his Mushishoju. He comes to the province of Banshu, which is where he was staying. Basically, that's the town where Musashi is now staying with his uncle. It's like around 8 years old, he leaves his father, and he's now practicing calligraphy with his uncle, living like a Zen monk. What they would do, these samurai would walk through a town. They'd put up a sign and say, anyone here want to challenge me, write down the time and date or the time and location, and I'll be there. He issued a public challenge by putting up an announcement on a notice board in which he wrote, "He who wishes to fight me with a sword should write his name and the date of the duel on this notice board." The master read this notice on his way to his calligraphy lesson, and on his way back he painted Amira's announcement black. Basically kind of like just kind of defaced it, like threw black ink all over it. Wrote his name, his address, and the date of the duel. He went back to the temple, not saying a word to anyone, picked out among the firewood a good hard piece from which to make a wooden sword. At this point, a messenger arrived. So he gets back to his calligraphy class, finds a good stick, cleans it up, gets ready. And then all of a sudden, a messenger arrives. The monk received him himself, wondering why a messenger should have come. His uncle was surprised that there was a messenger. There was no reason for a messenger to be there. He goes, "I've come to convey a message from Arima, who is traveling to improve his swordsmanship. Would you be kind enough to pass this message on to Mr. Miyamoto Musashi, that Amira agrees to fight him at the exact time he indicated." The monk was shocked by his news and said, "This is inconceivable, because Banasuke is only a child of 13. He is incapable of facing an accomplished swordsman." He continued and pointed out the master, who was sitting off to one side and listening. "We're talking about this little kid here. It is unthinkable for him to fight a duel. Would you be kind enough to go back, please, and ask Mr. Arima to excuse him, given that it was no more than a silly prank of a young kid to dare mess up his announcement?" The messenger grasped the situation, laughed, and said, "I understand, but in my opinion, Arima will not be persuaded even if I give this explanation. I would like you to come with me to his inn and explain to him directly and make your excuses to him. Then I think he will accept. Please come with me." The monk had no choice, and he left with the messenger, murmuring, "What a rotten kid." When he got to Arima's inn, he made excuses to him. "As your messenger has seen, the person in question is no more than a child whom you could only play with. Please have the indulgence to excuse him." Arima replied, "I understand that carrying on with this duel is out of question. Since the person in question is a child, it is better to drop the matter. But I'm traveling to various regions, and no one will believe that my announcement being painted black when I got to Banshu was only a child's prank. My honor is on the line. I request you to come with Benosuke to the place of the duel on the appointed day and explain to the public the reason the duel has not taken place. That will clear my dishonor. Having no choice, the monk departed, having promised to do as Arima asked. The day of the duel, the monk said to the master, "How annoying are you? Follow me." And he took him to the place appointed for the duel. Arima, dressed in his walking pants, was sitting on a chair in the dueling enclosure. The disciple was holding his sword and a wooden sword. The spectators surrounded the enclosure. The monk entered the enclosure and said to Arima, "As I explained to you, it is that young boy over there who was so stupid as to spoil your announcement. I ask you to be indulgent and forgive him for it." While the monk was saying this, the master entered the enclosure carrying his wooden sword and shouted, "Come on, let's fight!" He then attacked Arima. The latter drew his short sword and attacked. The master quickly ducked. Arima's sword cut through the air, and his hands came down on the master's shoulder. The master drove down and put his hand between his opponent's legs and threw him over his shoulder. The moment Arima tried to get up, the master, who had picked up his wooden sword, struck him hard between the eyes. Arima was stunned and was unable to get up quickly, and during the time the master struck him several blows in a row. Arima died and his disciple ran away. The spectators applauded.